Espinosa, and welcome to a new episode of the Red Couch Podcast. Red Couch Podcast.
I think just keep going because it's great.
Yeah, okay.
Red Couch Podcast, Summer Edition.
Summer edition. Today we have Hannah Theodore, the editor of the Interrobank, and today it's going to be my Google Translate because I cannot read my script.
I'm here. I got you. We're gonna make it. Thank you. I'm so happy to be back again. It's been a while since people they don't know this. It's been a while since we've talked because we shot the last episode we were together a week before it went out, which we don't usually do. So this is fun because we actually have something very kind of topical to talk about.
Because we had an idea, but we decided to change after the
things happened and there was stuff. So
today we want to talk about this American politics, right?
What's going on?
Yeah, because after the assassination attempt on Trump, we have questions and we talk about that. I think all of us, we talk in any case at home.
Absolutely. And I think that it's good. This is what we do in newsrooms too, right? Like when two journalists sit down, we're always like looking at stories like this. And this is, I was so like enraptured on the day just watching the news because it's really interesting at moments like this to just talk to other journalists and be like, how do we come at this? How would we cover this? How do we look at a story with two sides, right? And like try to understand and make sense of something that seems so nonsensical right now, right? Like the landscape of American politics is very confusing right now.
And crucial for the future.
That's everything. The other piece, right? Is like part of our job too is saying, okay, let's look at what's going on in the world and try to determine how it impacts our community, right?
That's right.
How do we localize what's happening?
And I wanted to ask you, how or where did you hear or read about this incident?
I was getting ready to make dinner and I opened my phone and I opened Twitter and I didn't see, the memes hadn't started yet. I saw a news story and it was like 8 minutes ago. And immediately I was like, whoa. Like, cause they just don't hear, but that just doesn't happen. So at that point I turned the news on. I watched like, American news companies live stream a lot of their news on YouTube. So I went and did that. I threw on like NBC or something. And I just like watched, it's the cycle, right? They show it over and over and over again. But that was where I was. I was just at home.
I was at home too.
Yeah.
And in my case, I read it because my brother from Spain sent me, it was very late, but it was Saturday,
Yeah.
And he told me on WhatsApp, hey, did you see that Trump was shot? And I was like, what? No. And I thought it was a fake news.
Same.
And I went directly to Google, like, Trump bullet shoot. And no, it was real, and I was in shock. So
that is the thing. It's like, I mean, I feel like where we're at now with information, it's like when you see a picture, because that's why I saw the picture, right? Who didn't see this picture? And so I see this picture, and the American flag is in the picture, and he's bleeding, and he's got his fist in the air, and I was like, what the heck what AI generated business is this? No, it was real.
I think everybody knows what happened, but I don't know if we could, explain or give more details about the incident. So we know that he was during his campaign, Trump, it was in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania?
He was
Pennsylvania.
I want to say, I think it was Butler, Pennsylvania, a fairly small town outside of Pittsburgh, having a campaign rally outdoors.
And a guy very, very young shot him, but it was a shot that went directly to his ear.
Yeah.
So
as far as we know, and like what he said, because later that day he was on his Truth Social and he put out the statement saying that the bullet grazed him or something, was like the language that they were using.
Do you know why Trump was not shot in his head? Because he wanted to see the screen to read the numbers of the immigrants in the United States. That's why he turned his head.
He was looking away.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it saved his life, I guess. That's crazy. The whole thing was I think at the time there was obviously a lot of confusion, right? Because I started following within minutes of it happening. So it's interesting watching a news story unfold before we have the information. This is another thing about journalism.
The role of the media in
The
covering
role-
critical
exactly.
situations.
And you'll notice sometimes the sort of passive language that news outlets will use when they don't know anything yet, right? So, for example, like some of the earliest news stories I saw about this assassination attempt, which they weren't calling it that, right? You can't say that yet. The earliest reports they're using language like loud pops were heard at Trump rally. And then the president was bleeding, right? It's like they don't know. Was there a shooter? Was it a gun? All we know is that we heard sounds and then the president or the former president went down, right?
Yeah, because a lot of activists or people who support Trump say that, hey, why journalists didn't say directly that it was an assassination, it was an assassination attempt on Trump.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's just journalistic practice, right? We can't say that. And I don't think it was until, it was confirmed that the FBI was going to be reporting it, investigating it. At that point, then we get the confirmation, yes, okay, they've determined this is an assassination attempt. We now have, evidence from local police departments that there was a shooter. Right now we can start using more clear language. But yeah, it's interesting watching a story like that unfold in real time.
and still we don't have, we don't have more details about this person, the person who shot, and there was a victim. It was not only the shooter,
Yeah.
it was one of the attendants of this event or from the how you can say the event or no
Rally, the rally.
yeah
Yeah.
it was one of the attendants, so
Yeah, so I think within an hour, we knew, or it was being reported at that point that an attendee had died and the shooter was dead. That's what we knew. The shooter was dead and an attendee had died. And I think there had been reports that maybe there was another attendee who was in critical condition or something. I want to say it wasn't until the next day, I think, that the shooter was identified.
that's it.
Right. And so this is what's interesting, watching these things happen in like the social media world, right? There was a point, I think, maybe 2 hours after the news broke where I really had to say to myself, like, it's time to kind of put down the phone, right? Look away for a bit, because it was reaching that point where we weren't going to be getting any new information, right? Nothing new was going to be reported. Things needed to be investigated, right? There was nothing else that we could have known at that time. So instead, you're just exposing yourself to conspiracy theories, and there were a whole
lot
bunch
of
of
videos
those.
on YouTube.
You know,
Oh my
like
gosh.
so if you're passionate and if you care about accurate information, and this is what I said to myself that night, I was like, it makes more sense for me at this point to go to sleep, and when I wake up, there will be more information, credible
For
information
sure.
and accurate information, right? And I think it's good. It's that as we get more into our conversation about just like this election in general and like what's going to happen now, I think that's a good mindset to have going forward. Is just like, if you're unsure about something, just wait, right? When something like this happens, which is sort of so unlikely,
Don't
right?
test, don't write something on social media that you know that perhaps it could change. So,
Exactly,
because the story
right?
can
It can change.
evolve. Yeah.
And that's what you'll see as you're following the news, right? Is like maybe yeah, you want to see them using more definitive language, but the truth is that they're not using definitive language because they don't have all the information yet, right? You know, I don't want to have like an opinion on what's going on necessarily. I think that we're seeing sort of like heightened levels of political passion and political radicalism, which is very kind of unique to this juncture in time. We're seeing and more violence in general in terms of like how folks are expressing their political views, right? And not to say that this was necessarily politically motivated. I don't know. I think we know some details about the shooter's political affiliation, but like the ease at which folks are being sort of radicalized it's happening a lot more frequently, and it's getting a lot easier with the access to the internet, right? And the easy access to lethal weapons that we already know is a problem in the United States, right? I don't know. I don't know about security protocols. I can't speak to that.
I don't
but
know.
Like,
Well, in Canada,
it's pretty wild that was because they got snipers on their roofs and stuff. Like, I find it's just wild to me that he was like 300 yards away or something. He wasn't actually inside the like where the rally was being held. So that's a factor too, right? How could they have known when he wasn't actually there? There's tons of security protocols you have to go through to get in, right?
I was thinking because I have just remembered that in Vancouver there was a politician or an activist who was murdered here in Canada, but I don't know if you know something that happened in the past or
Like recently?
Yeah, recently the only person or political figure that I know it's this person from Vancouver.
I mean, there's been some moments of like people have tried to sort of like a couple years ago, someone kind of someone threw a rock at Trudeau or something. Remember that?
Wow.
That was maybe here in London. Am I crazy? I feel like no, this definitely happened. I think in the UK, someone throws milkshakes at Nigel Farage. I do feel like there's people, politicians want to be able to do that thing where they can be close to people, right? And that's where the rock thing happened with Trudeau. He was in a crowd, right? Same with Nigel Farage. He was just walking about, trying to like be present with people. But that's, I guess, the risk, right? Is like with the sort of heightened emotions that people have right now.
It's a risk, but at the same time, I think across the world or in Canada, we agree that that's not the way that you have to show your frustration, I don't want to say hate, but that you don't agree with the politicians and specifically with Donald Trump.
I think maybe there's a sort of sense of helplessness and powerlessness right now, and I can imagine this might feel especially true in the States, right, where the voting system is quite strange, right? That really your vote matters, but at the end of the day, the Electoral College is going to be deciding who becomes the president, right? And if you're feeling right now, which I get, this is the air that I'm getting from the way folks are feeling about this election, is that they don't feel satisfied with either candidate, right? And they feel sort of powerless, and that they've reached this point of like, it feels like they're on the precipice of, I mean, their democracy is at risk. I think this is what it feels like, right? And so when you reach that point and you're going, well, I'm voting in these elections, or I'm trying to do things the civil way, and it's historically not working, right? So maybe you go to like extreme measures like this. I'm not justifying it at all. I'm just saying.
No, but I understand your point of view, what you want to say.
Where we're at right now, where like American politics are at, I think all of that powerlessness and helplessness is feeding into the increased tension and polarization, right? Which I know sometimes that unleashes itself as violence,
And is it going to affect the elections?
I think absolutely.
The American,
I mean, it was pretty wild watching, like, because I was watching the news. I saw reporters speaking to Trump supporters who were at the rally, and there's definitely sort of a sense. I mean, his base is going to vote for him regardless, right? He was already kind of like, they already see him some type of way, But this sort of heightens this like feeling that they already have about him, that like everyone's out to get Trump. We need to vote for him because like we need to have his back. He needs us, right? And we need him.
He almost sacrificed his life. This is
right. Like
a story. According to the picture, know that it's history that he's like a superhero. He overcame all the barriers and included the death.
Exactly right. Like he dodged a bullet for his country. Like I saw a lot of that.
Yeah, no, it's a story that it's going to be created according this incident and everything. So
and in the way that it's going to sort of rile them up, what I see from the Dems is a sort of attempt to tone down, right? To say, we don't condone political violence. We all need to like be civil. Everyone needs to like come together at this moment or whatever. But I guarantee you that's not what they're saying on the Trump side, right?
Well, I would like to say that, for example, in the case of Roosevelt Theodore, he lost the elections. It was the second time that he wanted to be president, and he lost after, you know, this
After an
bullet.
assassination
Yeah, and the
attempt.
bullet was in his body until the last day of his life, for example.
Wow.
And we have just mentioned Ronald Reagan. Obviously, he is the most important popular president in the United States. But after his own assassination attempt, he lost the credibility and, you know, the credibility with the American society. So it's interesting. So I don't know if it depends how the campaign of Trump is going to work after this incident.
Yeah.
It could win, but sometimes I'm not sure he's going to win.
It'll really all depend. I think right now there's a lot of doubt, I think, on the Democratic side about, I mean, there's been questions since the first debate, right? About, you know, whether or not he's even a good candidate, if he even has what it takes to, you know, he's going to be what, 81 at the, I forget. He's old. They're both old.
No,
but like
he
that's
is
the
70,
concern,
almost
right?
80 years, but he's 78, 79. Because
Yeah.
I saw it before this podcast. I wanted to check, you know, the
You
age
could-
of both candidates.
Like you could almost see the narrative being spun, right? That like, I think it did. Trump, I'm pretty sure said this, or I could very easily see him saying it, that like, you know, oh, that bullet would have probably killed Biden, right? Like you could start
Oh my
spinning,
gosh,
right?
yeah.
Like this is what I mean, is like the kind of language they can start to use now is like Trump is so strong that he was able to survive this, right? And like that,
Yeah.
depending on, but it'll depend, right? Will that turn off voters to use that kind of rhetoric, right? Also, I think a lot of the time Trump supporters do that work for him, right? He doesn't need to use that kind of language because they will, right?
Did you watch the debate
I did
between
watch
both
the debate.
candidates?
I did
Because,
watch.
for example, it's the reality that Biden, for me, didn't do it very well.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, if he wants to improve, or he wants to avoid the comment that he lost his mind, he is not ready to be president again, he should go more time. I mean, he should be in television and he should go to more debates. I think for me it will be the solution, because if people say that he's not prepared for doing this, prove that it's not true. So
Yeah.
go to the television, go to debates. It's my particular opinion.
I think that's valid, and I think that's what they've been trying to do, right? Like getting him out to those rallies, having him kind of like be directly, you know, they'll always say like he does much better in those scenarios,
Yeah.
right? And the sort of narrative that the spin, if you will, after the debate was that like, well, he had an off night, and then now here's all these examples of times where he's doing great, right? Yeah, like they're trying to get him on like the news too, right? Go do interviews, go to your rallies, be energetic. Because like you said, put him in front of people and try to show
And
him.
prove it. Yeah,
right? Yeah.
that you are the best candidate.
Yeah.
It's my particular opinion. After, you know, the debate, I watched it with my boyfriend, so
Yeah.
I was like, no, he didn't do a good job. I mean, that's the reality. And at the same time, do you think that this incident could affect the elections in Canada next year, or it's going to depend the results in these elections?
You know, I think Canada has a lot of its own issues that it's dealing with right now, in terms of like our economy, and some of the more pressing polarizing political issues that we see here, which tend to focus more on things like immigration and at a local level, the opioid crisis and the drug crisis and homelessness and things like that. I do think that we do see a certain level of influence from American politics. I think from people who are mostly watching American news, right? And kind of letting it influence the way that they think about, politics in Canada. We are very different, right? The American political system is one of a kind. For better or for worse, there is no other political system in the world like it. We are not like that here. Ours is very different. So, when you see I see certain language kind of trickle its way here, especially related to LGBTQ issues that kind of funnels up here. And you can see some of those more far right policies or mindsets being, regurgitated by conservative politicians here. I don't necessarily think that it's as effective here. I do know that people will get riled up about that kind of thing. And if we see any kind of influence on our election, I think it will be in that form, right? Just sort of right-wing politicians in Canada that are maybe echoing certain sentiments that we're hearing from, right-wing politicians in the States. Like I said, I think whatever happens with our election next year will be reflective of what's been going on here for the past few years and people's feelings about that. I also think, depending on the results of the U.S. election, we might have potentially very different neighbors to the south, right? Folks may or may not be aware of Project 2025. If Trump is reelected, there's kind of a whole plan to just completely restructure the powers of the president and, White House staffing. And, that creates major complications for foreign affairs, right? Which includes us. So things like that will potentially have some impact on how people are at least thinking about the Canadian election. If Trump wins, it might rile up left-wing voters in Canada to say, well, we don't want that, right? On the other hand, it might do the exact opposite. So it's so hard to say. Mm-hmm. As I say, I think we are influenced here and there by American politics, quite frequently.
We should do a coverage next year about the election.
We'll be all over it. We're going to be all over it. And the U.S. election too, right?
Of course.
This is why we talk about these things, because we understand that even though we are in Canada, there is strong interest in this, right? Globally, there's strong interest in the state of the United States, right? It's a powerhouse country, and it brands itself as a powerhouse country, and it sort of sets an example oftentimes for the rest of the world. So people are watching, right? We're watching. People all over the world are watching. It'll be very curious to see how everything unfolds. If this assassination attempt is indicative of where we're headed for the next, how many more months? God.
It's going to be on November.
It's like the longest campaign.
Yeah.
Longest
4 months.
period.
We have 4 months.
We have 4 months here? Mm-hmm. It feels like it feels like they've been campaigning already, because they have. But the conventions are right now? Their official nominations are only really just happening. But it's such a long
Perhaps Biden is not a candidate. We don't know. There are rumors.
We'll see. I don't think the Dems are gonna.
Yeah.
I think Biden's staying.
Yeah.
At this point, I think he's staying. But yeah, all of this will be very interesting to see. I don't know. I don't know if it, because sometimes people are, these attempts sometimes have copycats, right? Who knows? I'm not saying anything will happen. I'm just saying it's very. Sometimes when something like this happens, it inspires other people.
In any case, the Interbank is going to do a good job.
We'll be here. We'll be watching. We'll be keeping you informed. And as I said, it's all about localizing, right?
So thank you so much, Hannah. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Red Couch Podcast. You know that you can catch up with every episode on our website, wherever you get your podcast. We have Apple, Google, Spotify. And if you want to see these beautiful faces, you can watch on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and subscribe to our newsletter to keep up with fashion. For the Interroban, I'm Gracia Espinosa.